It happened last autumn when I rented a small cabin in the mountains for the weekend. I needed to get away from the city's chaos, hoping for quiet time to clear my head and finish some freelance projects. The cabin was tucked down a gravel road, far from neighbors, with tall pines pressing in on all sides. When I first arrived, the isolation felt refreshing. By nightfall, it felt like the silence could swallow me whole. The first night was calm, but on the second evening, a storm rolled in. By dusk, the wind was screaming through the trees, and sheets of rain drummed on the roof. The power flickered while I was working on my laptop, so I lit a few candles. Around 9 p.m., I got up to make tea, and that's when I saw it, a handprint on the living room window. It wasn't mine. The shape was distinct, with streaks from dripping rain running through the smeared fingers. My chest tightened. I stepped onto the porch, scanning the tree line, but the rain and darkness swallowed everything beyond a few feet. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was left there by the cleaning staff earlier. But deep down, I didn't believe that. I locked the front door and checked the back. That's when I noticed the footprints, bare human footprints, glistening with rainwater, leading right up to the back door. The sight made my stomach turn. I closed every curtain and double-checked every lock. A little past 10, the power cut out completely. I stood in the dark, my own breathing too loud. I grabbed my phone, no signal. Then I heard it, the faint sound of something metal scraping against the back door. It wasn't random noise from the storm. It was deliberate. I could hear slow, patient movements, like someone trying to pry the lock open. I grabbed a kitchen knife and held it with both hands, my knuckles white. The scraping stopped, replaced by footsteps circling the cabin. Each step crunched against gravel, growing closer, then moving away. I tried not to breathe. The footsteps reached the front porch, and for a moment, everything was silent. Then the doorknob began to turn. At first, it moved slowly, almost testing, and then violently rattling, shaking, the entire door frame groaning under the force. My legs trembled as I backed away into the hallway. I knew I had seconds to act. I sprinted to the bedroom, shoved my bag over my shoulder, and yanked the window open. Rain and wind lashed my face as I pushed the screen out. As I was climbing onto the sill, I heard the sharp, splintering crack of wood, the front door frame giving way. My blood ran cold. He was inside. I dropped down into the mud, my shoes sinking, and ran into the forest. The rain blurred everything. Branches slapped my face, tearing at my clothes. Then I heard him. Heavy footsteps, crashing through the underbrush not far behind. He was chasing me. I ran blindly, my breath ragged, heart pounding in my ears. A flash of lightning lit up the woods, and in that brief second I saw him. A hooded figure, maybe 20 feet away, his silhouette sharp against the glow. I stumbled and nearly fell, but I forced my legs to keep moving. The mud sucked at my shoes with every step. I veered off the faint path, hoping to lose him among the trees, but he was relentless. The sounds of branches breaking and his breath cutting through the rain told me he was closing in. I tripped over a root and slammed onto my knees. Pain shot up my leg, but before I could cry out, I saw his shadow moving between the trees. He was almost on me. I scrambled to my feet, grabbing a thick branch to push off the ground, and ran harder. My lungs felt like they were tearing, and the storm made it nearly impossible to see. Then, through the blur of rain, I spotted the faint metallic glint of my car. It was only 30 yards away, parked in the gravel clearing. I sprinted, adrenaline pushing me beyond exhaustion. I could hear him behind me, closer now, the sound of boots pounding the mud. A flash of lightning illuminated his face for just an instant. Pale skin, wild eyes, mouth twisted into something between rage and determination. That image will haunt me forever. I reached the car, fumbling for my keys with shaking hands. I dropped them in the mud, cursed, scooped them up with trembling fingers, and shoved them into the lock. The sound of his footsteps pounding the gravel behind me sent a spike of panic through my body. I jumped inside, slammed the door, and hit the lock button just as he reached the car. He lunged at the driver's side window, slamming his palm against the glass so hard I thought it would crack. I screamed and twisted the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I floored the gas. Mud sprayed as the car fishtailed, the headlights briefly catching his figure as he stepped back, his hands still raised like he wanted to grab me through the glass. I didn't stop driving until I reached the highway. My hands were still shaking when I called 911 from a gas station. When the police checked the cabin, they found the front door nearly off its hinges and muddy boot prints leading to the bedroom, right to the window where I'd escaped. They also found cigarette butts and a soaked jacket on the back deck, suggesting he'd been out there for hours, maybe longer. One officer said quietly, "This guy wasn't passing through. He was waiting." That thought alone makes my skin crawl. The idea that he'd been out there in the rain, watching me, waiting for the moment I'd fall asleep. I can't shake it. I never went back for my things. I'd been working the graveyard shift at Murphy's Convenience for about 3 months when it happened. The job wasn't glamorous, but it paid better than day shifts, and I needed every dollar I could get. Most nights were quiet, just the occasional drunk buying cigarettes or a trucker grabbing coffee. The 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. stretch was usually dead silent. That Tuesday started like any other. Rain had been pounding the city all evening, turning the streets into rivers and keeping most people indoors. I'd settled into my routine, restocking shelves, cleaning the coffee machine, and catching up on homework between customers. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting their harsh glow across the empty aisles. Around 3 a.m., I noticed him. At first, he was just a figure standing under the streetlight across the parking lot. I figured he was waiting for a bus or an Uber, maybe trying to stay dry. But after checking the security monitor a few times, I realized he hadn't moved. Not even slightly. He was just standing there, facing the store. I tried to focus on other things, but every time I glanced up, he was still there. The way the light fell across his face, I could see he was staring directly at the store windows. At me. By 3:30, my hands were getting sweaty. I pulled up the exterior camera feeds on the security system and scrolled back through the footage. My stomach dropped. He'd been there since 1:47 a.m., over an hour before I'd first noticed him. In the earlier footage, I could see him pacing around the parking lot's edge, always keeping his distance, but never taking his eyes off the building. Around 4 a.m., he started moving. It wasn't normal walking. He'd take a few steps toward the store, then stop when headlights appeared down the street. Each time a car passed, he'd retreat back into the shadows near the dumpster. But once the road was clear again, he'd continue his slow approach. I could see something in his right hand now, something long and thin that caught the streetlight. My mouth went dry. I fumbled for my phone, but we were in one of those dead zones where you barely get one bar. The landline behind the counter was my only reliable connection to the outside world. I was reaching for it when everything went black. The power had cut out completely. Even the emergency lighting flickered once and died, leaving me in absolute darkness. Outside, I could hear the rain hammering against the windows, but underneath it was another sound, metal scraping against metal. He was at the front door. I crouched behind the counter, my heart pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. The scraping continued, methodical and patient. Then I heard the distinctive crack of glass beginning to give way. He was using some kind of pry bar on the door frame, working at the lock. The first window panel shattered. I heard glass hitting the floor, then silence. A few seconds later, an arm reached through the broken pane, fumbling for the door handle from the inside. That's when I moved. I grabbed the aluminum baseball bat we kept behind the register, the one my manager insisted on after the store down the street got robbed. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. The front door swung open with a soft chime that sounded obscene in the darkness. I could hear him stepping carefully through the broken glass, but I couldn't see anything. I waited until I heard him moving past the candy aisle, then bolted for the back exit. My sneakers squeaked against the linoleum as I ran through the stockroom, knocking over boxes in my panic. Behind me, his footsteps quickened. I burst through the rear fire door and into the alley, rain immediately soaking through my uniform shirt. I didn't look back, just ran toward the 24-hour laundromat next door, screaming for help. Mrs. Chun, the night attendant, took one look at me and called 911. The police found him 20 minutes later, sitting calmly in his car 2 blocks away. In his backpack, they discovered zip ties, duct tape, and a hunting knife with an 8-inch blade. But it was what they found at his apartment that really shook me. Detective Morrison showed me the photos later. My work schedule was taped to his bedroom wall, along with pictures of me taken through the store windows over the past 3 weeks. He'd documented my routines, my break times, even what I ate during my shifts. There were similar files for 2 other night shift workers across the city. I quit the next day. Sometimes I still wake up hearing that soft door chime, wondering how many other nights he'd been out there, watching and waiting in the dark. My old Honda finally died on Route 77, right as the sun was bleeding out behind the mountains. One minute I was coasting down a long, empty stretch of snow-dusted asphalt, and the next there was a violent shudder, a horrible grinding noise, and then just silence. The engine was dead. Of course, my phone had 0 bars. I was a 20-year-old college kid, miles from the nearest town, and the temperature was already dropping below freezing. For the better part of an hour, I just sat there, a special kind of dread creeping into my bones that was colder than the air outside. Every car I'd seen had been going the opposite direction. Just as I was about to risk walking, a pair of yellow headlights cut through the twilight. It was an old, beat-up Ford tow truck, rust blooming on its fenders like a disease. I've never been more relieved to see another human being. The driver, an older man with a deeply lined face and a faded flannel jacket, hopped out. He had a wide, almost too friendly smile. "Car trouble?" he asked, his voice a gravelly baritone. "Yeah," I said, my own voice chattering. "Engine just gave out." "Well, you picked a heck of a place for it," he chuckled. "I can give you a lift to Pine Ridge. That's the next town over. Can't tow you till morning, though." I thanked him profusely and climbed into the cab. The first thing I noticed was the smell. It was an overpowering, chemical scent, like someone had spilled an entire bottle of industrial-strength bleach. The vinyl seats were cracked, and the dashboard was cluttered with old maps and fast food wrappers. He introduced himself as Earl, and as we pulled away, leaving my dead car on the shoulder, his cheerfulness started to feel off. He kept glancing over at me, his smile fixed in place, his eyes holding an intensity that didn't match his folksy demeanor. "I know a shortcut," he announced after a few minutes, turning off the main highway onto an unpaved, unmarked logging road. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, my unease growing. The narrow road was flanked by thick, dark woods, and we were heading deeper into them, away from any sign of civilization. "Don't you worry, son," he said with that same unnerving chuckle. "I know these woods like the back of my hand. Save us a good 20 minutes. The truck bounced and jostled over the frozen ruts. I was trying to stay calm, telling myself he was just a local trying to be helpful. Then he said it. "So, you go to Northwood University?" My nephew thought about going there. "Good school." I froze. A cold spike of pure fear shot through me. I was wearing a thick winter coat zipped up to my chin. My university sweatshirt was completely hidden underneath. There was absolutely no way he could have known that. I hadn't told him my name, let alone where I went to college. My throat went dry. "How did you know that?" I managed to ask. Earl's smile tightened. He didn't answer. Instead, the truck slowed and pulled up to a dilapidated cabin set back from the dirt road. A single, bare bulb cast a sickly yellow light over a crooked porch. "Well, we're here," he said. His voice had lost all its warmth. I stared at the dark windows of the cabin, at the oppressive silence of the forest around us. "This isn't Pine Ridge," I whispered. He turned his whole body to face me then, and the friendly old man was gone. His face was a cold, predatory mask. "Get out of the truck," he said, his voice flat and hard. He then started to slowly reach under his seat. I didn't wait to see what he was reaching for. Primal fear took over. I slammed my shoulder into the passenger door, shoving it open and stumbling out into the biting cold. I heard Earl grunt in surprise as the door hit him. I didn't look back. I just ran, sprinting blindly into the dark woods, the sharp, stinging branches whipping at my face and hands. I could hear the truck door open and Earl's furious voice shouting behind me, "Get back here, you little..." I ran harder than I ever have in my life. My lungs burned, and my legs felt like lead, but the sound of his voice propelled me forward. I fell, cut my knee on a rock, and scrambled back up, tasting blood and terror. After what felt like an eternity, I burst through a line of trees and stumbled back onto the cold asphalt of the main highway. Headlights were approaching. I waved my arms frantically, screaming, and a massive county snowplow screeched to a halt just feet from me. The driver, a heavy-set man with a kind face, took one look at my panicked state and immediately called the state police. While I sat wrapped in a blanket in his warm cab, I told the troopers everything. They went to investigate the logging road. An hour later, they returned. They'd found the cabin. Inside, they found zip ties, rolls of duct tape, and a small wooden box. In that box was a collection of student IDs from colleges all over the state, along with several driver's licenses. One of the IDs belonged to a student who had vanished on this same stretch of road last winter. The tow truck was stolen. They searched the woods all night, but they never found Earl. The troopers told me the chemical smell in the truck was probably from him trying to clean the upholstery. They didn't have to tell me what he was trying to clean. I already knew.